This video is brought to you by my supporters on Patreon. I'm here with a video showing you how I made the legs for my Tyrande cosplay. At this point, I've already cut everything out and now I'm just gluing the pieces together. I made these patterns by using the duct tape method, but if you don't want to bother patterning these out, they are available on my store Envy and Etsy. Both are linked in the description. Anyways, I made the leg pieces out of 4mm EVA foam. I believe that's how thick it was, but 6mm EVA foam should work too. And I'm using contact cement to glue everything together. I glue everything together except for the back edge. So I glued the front seam together and then the two darts that are on either side. Next, I heat the foam up with a heat gun so that it's easier to shape and will retain its shape afterwards. And I shape that around my leg. This also helps so that when I do finally glue shut the back seam, it doesn't like have a bunch of tension pulling at it trying to pull it apart. And I just shape it around my leg. Be careful if you're doing this because you can burn yourself. I wore pants, obviously, as you can see here, and that helped protect my skin from being burned because sometimes this foam can get really hot. Then I used a Dremel to sand down the seam line to make sure those are nice and smooth. Next, I started adding bevels wherever bevel details were needed. I used 10mm bevels for the smaller bevels, which are mostly more towards like the center kind of, and then I used 20mm bevels for the larger bevels, which are around like the top and bottom edge. You'll get a better idea if you look at a reference photo or the photos of my completed costume, which are on my Instagram and website, or just continue watching this video. I have an entire video on how I glue bevels so that they come to like a corner or fit in corners, and how I taper them for whenever they spiral and stuff. Those are on my YouTube channel. If you search like bevels, they should pop up. After applying the bevels around the edges, I take my Dremel and sand down those edges to make sure those seam lines or the edges are nice and smooth and flow into one another. I next worked on the little back piece that is on her leg. She has like this weird rectangular piece on the back of the leg armor. Anyways, I worked on that. Once again, it's made out of 4mm EVA foam. 6mm EVA foam will work fine as well. And I used the 10 and 20mm bevels to add all the beveled details. And like before, I'm using contact cement to glue all of this together. All of the foam for this project, by the way, was from Cosplay Crafts. I have a link down in the description. It is an affiliate link, so if you make a purchase through my link, I get a little bit in like store credit so that I can afford more craft foam and stuff to make more videos like this. So if you are looking for cosplay supplies and are in need of them, then use that link maybe. Once all of the bevels were attached, I take my Dremel and sand all around the edges to smooth out those and smooth out any seam lines. I closed up most of the back seam, however I left the really bottom section of the ankle piece open because I needed my foot to still like slip through, and that's the only way that it could. After I did that though, I started applying glue to the back of the leg piece and the back of that rectangle piece that I was just working on, and then glued the two together. I only glue the pieces together at the centers to start with and then glue the edges because that makes it easier to keep all of the pieces aligned. Use a heat gun to help bend and shape these pieces a little bit better. I found that the little rectangle piece, because of how thick the bevels were, was having a little bit of trouble, so I just used a heat gun to shape that better. I'm also using a heat gun here to better shape the ankle piece so that it actually sits closed, because I didn't want to add closures. After I have that rectangular piece that goes at like the back of the leg piece glued on, I finally attach the bevel to the top and the smaller 10mm bevels at the center that you can kind of see in this clip, like the little center details of the leg pieces. Again, it's best to follow a reference photo to figure out like where all these beveled details go. And once both of those are glued together, like the back piece and this 10mm bevel, I then take my Dremel and sand around the top of the leg piece entirely to make sure those edges are all nice and smooth. After that, the legs were ready to be primed. I primed it with a few layers of wood glue mixed with a teensy bit of water just to make the wood glue apply smoother. I did about 2 layers of wood glue and then applied Bondo's gap filler and spot putty to the seams, let that dry, sanded that down, which you'll see here in a little bit, and then did a few more layers of wood glue. I think I did a total of like 5 layers of wood glue. As I mentioned, I used Bondo's gap filler and spot putty to fill some bigger seam lines in and then let that dry and sanded it down. I did this after a couple layers of wood glue, and I did it just to make things look a lot more smooth and fill in those seams because they weren't quite as smooth as they could be, and this definitely helps. After a couple layers of wood glue, it was time for painting. I used an airbrush to paint this entire thing, however acrylic paints and a paintbrush or spray paints work too. I started off by painting all the bevel details with a silver color. When all of the silver details were painted and fully dry, I taped them off using painter's tape, and then I used white spray paint to spray on the white base of the rest of the armor. And then I used my airbrush to apply this tealish, greenish shadowing all the way around the edge of the armor, like wherever there's an edge or like yeah, I guess that's the best. Any place there'd be a shadow, I applied the green color because that kind of mimicked the reference art. Her stuff had like a greenish shadow or a greenish hue to it, and so this is how I decided to represent it. I think it turned out okay. I also went back in later, however I don't have it in this video, and added a even darker teal-ish turquoisey color way closer to the edge, and then blended that into the color that I'm applying now. I do have footage of that in some of my other videos, and for that I used acrylic paint and a very thin paintbrush to do. And here I'm just removing the tape. Once again, I do go back and add in a bit more shading with a darker teal color, but that's all I have for this video. So hopefully you guys found this video helpful anyways, and check out some of my other videos. Again, I have some videos on how I attach the bevels to one another and taper them for whenever they come into that spirally point, and a bunch of other videos. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a lovely day, and bye!